Welcome to the Why Coaching Works podcast. My name is Monty Wyatt, and I'm here to take you on a journey into the world of coaching, exploring its many different facets and uncovering its profound impact on individuals, businesses, and executives alike. We'll be delving into real-life case studies combined with in-depth research from coaching experts to give you a better understanding of why coaching works today. So if you're ready to begin your exploration into the power of coaching, then let's get started. Before we get into this month's episode, here's a short message from Adding Zero's Executive Development. As CEO, you demand performance and results from your team. If you're committed to developing a cohesive, driven organization that achieves successful outcomes every single month, we need to talk. It's time to see how organizational and executive development from Adding Zeros can help. We focus on strategic planning, executive coaching, team alignment and engagement, organizational culture, and clarity of implementation. Contact Monty Wyatt by booking an appointment at www.addZerosNow.com. That's AddZerosNow.com. AddZerosNow.com. If you're ready, now is the time. I have a few coaching spots available for 2025. Lock in your team today. Now let's begin today's episode. Welcome to the Why Coaching Works podcast, where we talk about the impact of coaching, growth of businesses, and personal development. I'm your host, Monty Wyatt. If you're a CEO, executive, or business owner, this is the show for you. We call our audience the achiever because you're always striving for the next level. It is with great pleasure to introduce our guest today. He's a international speaker, writer, mental performance coach. He engages athletes, entrepreneurs, and leaders with fresh perspectives on mental toughness and resilience. Please join me in welcoming Gary Chupik. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to, I don't think I've had a mental performance coach on the show yet. So I'm excited to hear more about how you define mental performance and what kind of impact you're having on with not only leaders, but athletes. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. So great.
Being the first one, yeah, let's set the bar as high as we can, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's right. That's right. I'd love for you to start off with telling us a little story. How did you get into coaching? We'll talk about mental performance here in a moment, but I'd love to hear how you got into the industry and what really made you become a coach and what kind of impact you wanted to make.
Well, for 28 years, I was a pastor in a church in the Pacific Northwest here in the Seattle area. And so I've done a lot of leading throughout my time. I never actually wanted to be a leader. I didn't think I was a leader growing up, but you sort of, get called into it. And so I ended up leading. But my primary mode of teaching people and reaching people and actually training people was a coaching model. So I was doing coaching far before I even knew what that was, because I always felt like I wanted to bring the best out of people, whether it was on my staff or whether it was people sitting in the congregation. So I'm much more conversational and challenging and inspiring rather than telling. And so the coaching model came very easy to me. So I went through a burnout in 2017, and it was just really about self-mismanagement. I just said yes to too many things and took on too many roles and responsibilities. And I'm a perfectionist, so that was like a concoction for disaster. And I ended up taking some time off and rethinking things. And for me, it was probably my midlife crisis. And I probably could have bought a Camaro or a Mustang, or could rethink my future. And I decided to rethink my future and had some space to be able to do that. And through various conversations and what I would call divine appointments, I ended up meeting some pretty special people along the way, encouraging me to open up my own coaching business and coaching and consulting. I think I was too familiar with the helps industry and too familiar with, sometimes you're in the bottle, right? Like
Yep.
you're in a pickle jar, but you can't see the label on the outside. You're in it. And I think I just needed a different operating system and different coding language to help myself. And I think sports psych did that for me. So I dove in with both feet on sports psych stuff. I can honestly say I put in 1,000 hours of study in sports psych in 1 year. So I put my, kids to bed, and my wife would go to bed early, and then I'd stay up for another 2 or 3 hours just studying sports psych. And I was like, oh, I've come home. Like this is excellent for me. And I read a book called by Trevor Moawad, It Takes What It Takes. And I was like, oh yeah, I get this guy. And actually, without even really realizing it, I became familiar with Trevor. And I had a friend who said, "Hey, have you ever met Trevor Moad?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I've never even thought about it." And he goes, "Well, I know the family and I know him. Would you be interested in having a conversation with him one on one?" I was like, "Well, would I?" Like I was a little kid in the candy store. And so I got to meet Trevor, and Trevor just for whatever strange reason took a liking to me, and so every month we had a phone call, like a mentoring phone call. And then a couple months into it, he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing this for a living?" And I said, "Actually, no, I really haven't." And he said, "I think you could be pretty good at this. What I want you to do is I want you to put together your protocol in what you think it takes to help an athlete or a business person to be successful from a mindset perspective." And so I put together my protocol for him next month, and he looked at it. It was, 3 or 4 pages long, and he looked at it and he hired me on the spot. So I worked for Russell Wilson's mental performance coach and Russ's company, Limitless Minds, for a couple of years, and and then I just went out on my own, and it was sort of a healthy, good sort of transition. And so for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been doing this, and got all types of certifications and training and that kind of thing. But really, it's about owning your own business. Like it's like you can get trained and you can know intellectually a lot of things, but running a business is so completely different. And it's one of my hangups that I have with the sports psychology world is they teach basically there's actually no such thing really as becoming a sports psychologist unless you're a psychologist.
Hmm.
And so that means 80 to 90% of what you're studying in college or even for your degree is typical psychology, which studies what's wrong with people. Now, think about that. The vast majority of what you're learning is trying to figure out what's wrong with people. But what if we could spend the vast majority of our time thinking about what's right with people
Mm.
and then passing on that knowledge about what works to other people? And that really turned me on. So if you're looking for a nail, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? Like you're just like looking to find out what's wrong. And I just didn't like that mindset. I was like, let's find out what's right with people. Let's pass on that information. So the last couple of years have been about building my business and building my clientele. And I speak at a lot of conferences and travel around the world and all across America, talking about mental performance and the common similarities there are between what it takes to be elite in sports and what it takes to be elite in business. And about 80 or 90% of it's the same. There are some differences. And even those differences are actually even more difficult for business people because you don't get a whole lot of days off when you start your own business or run your own business. So being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, it's a little bit different skill set than an athlete, but man, there's a lot of commonality.
Absolutely. I love that story, and being a pastor all those years really trained you for the conversation. So I love that.
My son said to me one time, he goes, "Man, you should have started this earlier. Where would you be today?" And I go, "I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think I was in the right classrooms. Like, I think a lot of the things that we go through are classrooms, and sometimes you don't get to choose your classes for the degree. They're given to you, and so it's like succeed in every class that you're in, and do your very best, and make sure you pass it. Because if you don't, it'll end up biting you back in the future, and you'll have to take the class again. So it's like succeed at everything you do."
Absolutely. Absolutely. We know I said we've had all kinds of different coaches on the show, and from life coaches to business coaches to strategy coaches, you name it. But I've never had a mental performance coach. So tell us a little bit about what that means as a mental performance coach and what you really help people think about.
Yeah, well, Pete Carroll said it really well. He said, "You don't have to be sick to want to get better." And oftentimes we think that coaching is when you're not doing very well, and so you need a coach. And it's so far from the truth, especially when you hear something like Russell Wilson talk to Trevor Moawad, his mental performance coach, every single day of the year, 365 days. Well, why would someone do that? Why would you talk to your coach every day? Well, if you wanted to stay sharp, and you wanted to be excellent at what you did, then you might invite a coach into your life that says, I mean, that knows you so intimately that they can ask you anything and they can ask you how you're performing, how you're thinking about things. And so, why is it that why do like professional football teams have coaches there all the time? Well, because, yeah, they're learning and they're training every single day. they're doing it. So it's not like, well, I want to coach because I'm not doing well and I need somebody. No, 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 no. If you want to have a sharp edge on your blade, you've really got to continuously invest in yourself. And one of the ways to do that is through mental performance training. Another way to say that is attitude. Like the old school word was like, hey, you need to watch your attitude, which is like watch your mindset, right? And so I think mindset is kind of like the thermostat in a house. It controls the temperature in every room. And so when your mindset is right, it affects every single relationship that you have in your life or all the different domains of your life. So when you think a certain way, it spills over into everything and permeates into everything. So yeah, your mindset controls a lot of what you do, a lot of your behaviors, who you are, what you are. And I think it's worth investing in.
Absolutely. That mindset can really block us. If we're not thinking the right way or we're not thinking big enough, it can freeze us up, it can hold us back, it can keep us from doing the things that need to be done every single day. So I love that you talk about talking to your coach every single day because we have those ups and downs every day, and you need someone to really get you back on track.
Well, agreed. I mean, I call it the illusion of choice.
Mm.
So if you want to be average at something, I mean, think of like the menu at the Cheesecake Factory. Yeah, if you want to be average at something, you can pick anything you want on that menu. You can eat anything you want and as much as you want. If you want to be really good at nutrition, you got to lower or lessen the amount of choices that you have. So you have few choices. But if you want to be elite at your nutrition, how many options do you have on that menu? Okay. Not, in fact, you have no choice, right? You have one choice, and that's your choice, right? I have no choice. I'm going to eat healthy. And so giving ourselves too many choices is actually a huge inhibitor when it comes to mental performance and performing on a high level. So yeah, it's like you gotta figure out what you want. And one of the common things I hear athletes and people in business say often is that I think too much. It's one of the most common things that I hear. And what's the problem with thinking too much? Well, and the way I teach it, our thoughts are like calories. If you have too many calories that you don't expend in a day, you get slow and lethargic, and over time you put on weight and you don't move as nimbly. Well, in the same way, if you're thinking too many thoughts, well, what happens to you, right? You get slow and lethargic and you just don't move as well. You're not that nimble. And so you might say, well, Gary, I just put in lots of good thoughts. I'm just like, no, no, that doesn't work either. You can eat, a pound of celery and 20 apples in a day, and you're still not going to feel well. So you have to limit the amount of even good thoughts that you have so that you can expend them throughout the day. And so limiting your thoughts is crucial to success because if you don't, and you lose a step and you get tired, you hesitate. And in sports, what does hesitation cost?
Mhm.
Okay. And in business, what does hesitation cost? There's a high cost to hesitating. And one of the things that it reflects is a lack of confidence, because if you're not confident, you hesitate. And so in business, if you're not confident, I mean, you're just going to lose your ability to make really great decisions because you're hesitant. And it's the same thing in sports. If you hesitate, then yeah, you lose out on opportunities. And as you well know, sports is a game of inches and business is a game of moments, right? And you have to be able to be confident. And in order for you to be confident, you got to know what you want. And you have to be really, really clear on because if you're not, you'll be hesitant. And if you hesitate in sports and business, you lose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to hear your perspective on really what coaching is, because you talk about, the mental aspect of it, but let's talk about the other side of it, what coaching is. And because we can focus on business, we can focus on sport, but it's the concept of coaching. How would you define coaching?
Well, it's really simple for me, and I don't know how technical it is, but I think coaching is about unlocking potential in people. So they might have an ambition or might be driven by ambition about what they want to be and do with their life. And that's fair. I mean, I think that's legit, but I don't find that to be very stable because my ambitions change all the time. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I read less authors in my world, in my arena, and I like to read more scholarly papers and research papers because I find that sometimes when I read an author, I'll say, man, I wish I would have thought of that idea. And I get jealous, right? They said it just the perfect way. And I think there's a time and a place for that. But I tend to read more research papers on things like ocular therapy and all sorts of kind of like new school kind of stuff, as well as the old school. Um, because I think it's really important that I'm original and I work hard at unlocking people. And I think sometimes people become so familiar with the language of coaching that we sort of tune out a little bit, and we have to create pattern interrupts. And I think telling stories or saying things like, thoughts are like calories. I think we have to break the patterns to get through to people because they kind of already know coachees and that language. And so I think there's value in saying things differently and coming up with different stories and illustrations to help. So I think ultimately it's about unlocking people's potential. And I think that's more about alignment than it is ambition.
Mm.
So they might want to like, hey, listen, I have the ambition of being a linebacker for, the Seattle Seahawks, but I'm not built for that physically. I'm not built for that, but I wish I was. But so my ambition might lead me in a certain direction, but I just know that alignment with my personality is a much more stable path for my future. And so I do something called identity-based performance because I know that's going to last. And in order for us to be successful, we have to be pretty consistent with what we're doing. And it takes time to succeed at things. And so if it's identity-based and we're tapping into the best parts of you, then we have the best shot at being consistent. And if we have the best shot at being consistent over time, that's probably going to produce inevitable results and good ones.
I love it. I love it. I really love how you said that, unlocking potential, because it is about seeing new things. It's about breaking through your challenges, seeing new ways of working that get you better results. And we all have, none of us are working at our full potential, that's for sure.
Mhm.
And so I'd love to hear a story of a client. You don't have to name names, but I'd love to hear the impact that you've had in changing somebody's mindset and helping them become mentally strong and resilient. So tell us a story about a client.
Well, there was a business owner that I was standing beside at a conference that I got invited to. And I didn't know him, didn't know anything. In fact, I knew very little about the industry. And I was invited to come. And so I reluctantly went. And there was a guy standing beside me. So what are you here for? And I'm like, I don't even really actually know. And he goes, wait a minute. Like, I've never met anyone who didn't know why they were at a conference. And I'm like, well, I'm here first. Right. I don't even actually know why I'm here. I was invited by someone on staff, and they were like, "Whoa, who invited you?" And I said, "This guy named Chris." And of course, he was the speaker at the conference. And he goes, "Oh, you know Chris?" I go, "No, I don't even know him." And it was just he was so perplexed, and just as perplexed as I was. And we ended up striking up a friendship. And he said, "Hey, give me a call sometime. Give me a call." And I was like, "Okay." Okay, so I called him, the next day and just said, "Hi, it's great meeting you." And so he sent me a video message back saying, "Hey, you know what? I'd really like to talk some more." And we ended up talking some more, flying out to Vegas, and then he was my first $100,000 client. And I remember one day I was in his office with the front glass wall, and he uh I was working with him, and he said, "Hey, would you step out of my office for a moment?" Like mid sentence. I'm just like, "Oh, sure, okay, all right, I can handle the curveball. It's okay." So I was in the hallway for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And then he waves me back in. And I go, "What just happened here?" And he said, "Well, you just made me $1.2 million." I'm like, "Wait, I'm confused. Like, what are you talking about?" And he said, "If I put into practice what you tell me, every time we talk, you save me or make me money. And so I think you're a great deal at 100,000." And I was like, "Man, I wish I would have charged more." So I think just helping people think differently. One of the ways I do that is by creating something called the third way. So oftentimes, or a hybrid, or oftentimes people think that most decisions or most opportunities are linear, and or binary. And oftentimes there's a third option. And in coaching, one of the ways that we can really help our clients is by creating hybrid responses or answers or solutions to their problem? Like, can you have the best of both worlds, essentially? And unless you ask for it, unless you're aware of it and you ask for it, you're not getting it. So one of the I think one of the best strategies for coaching is providing hybrid responses or solutions.
Hmm. I love that story because it is about impact. It's not about what the cost is. It's about what's the return and what the impact is that we create for folks. And it can be a small sentence, it can be a small word that you say that just clicks with that client. And it sounds like that was an amazing experience. So I love that. Love that story. You know, we as coaches, we also have to have coaches to stay congruent and continue to grow ourselves. Maybe tell us a little bit about an experience of how you've grown by being coached.
Yeah, it's interesting. So longevity in coaching is a really interesting aspect of coaching. Sometimes you coach and it's a one-off. Sometimes you coach and it's, 2 sessions, 5 sessions, 8 sessions, 10 sessions. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year. But having someone in your corner for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I think there's real value to that because the coach gets to know you. And it's interesting to me how uncomplicated that is for the coach. Because
Mhm.
in some senses, you think, well, I just keep asking the same questions after 10 sessions, 12 sessions, 20 sessions. And yet it doesn't seem to get that old. And my coach now, I have a couple coaches and they keep asking me the same questions. I'm like, they're brilliant. They're so simple that it's brilliant. And I think sometimes we think we have to be, as complex or as nuanced as we can possibly be for helping our clients, even long-term clients, when in reality, it's not the case. If you just keep things simple and you ask really good, simple questions and then stop talking, yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of our clients can figure stuff out, but they just need to be asked the question. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in longevity in coaching.
I love it. Yeah. If we're not being challenged, then why would our clients hire us? Because we've got to continue to grow. We've got to continue to get better every single time that our clients see us as well. So I love that. I love
Well,
that.
especially when we're being challenged.
Yes.
Like if we say, "Oh, here's something that I need to do. I don't want to do it, but I know I need to. The timing is right." And based on timing alone, like there was a guy by the name of Bill Gross from the Idea Lab, and he bought, a couple hundred companies and he was an amazing investor, and only half of those companies survived, or even less than half of them survived. But he wrote an email to all of the CEOs of those companies and said, "Hey, what's the reason for your success? Like, I want to try and like figure out the formula." And so he gave them sort of a grid of put in order of priority the reasons why you think you're successful. And so one was the product or service, another one was timing, another one was how much capital did you begin with, another one was your strategy, and the final one was your team. And so out of those 5 things, what would you attribute your success to the most? And the number one answer was timing.
Hmm.
Number one. Well, one of the companies that they had invested in was Uber and Airbnb. And you think to yourself, like, Airbnb, like, yeah, I mean, 20 years before that, if you would have invited strangers into your home for 20 bucks or 40 bucks, people would have just like laughed at you. Like, you would be classified as mentally insane. Like, it's just like, or deranged. But at the right moment in a recession where people are looking to make money, because everyone's hurting financially, and you open up a room or two in your home, or a rental space, it's like, yeah, this is perfect timing. And it worked. It worked. So if you were to remove all the top four and just, or bottom four, and just say timing, like what is it the right time for me to be doing right now? What's the right thing for me to be doing right now at this time? You might actually surprise at how shockingly powerful that question is what is it the right time for? And just stop talking and let your client answer the question, because that timing question is a really challenging and courageous one, because you may say, well, man, I don't want to admit it, I want to do everything else, but I know it's the right time for me to get in shape, or I know it's the right time for me to sell my business, or if it's the right time to hire someone, or the right time to get coaching. And so It's a very, very compelling, inspiring, challenging question and answer. And just that question alone can help change a client's future. Man, I think it's time that I work on my marriage because your marriage affects your business, like dramatically affects your business. So, I think it's worth asking those simple questions, and I think we make it too complicated.
Absolutely. I want to reinforce that to our audience, the achiever. It's about thinking about what's the thing that right now you should be focused on. It's the right time for what?
Yeah.
And that's a great question for every time you have the conversation and making progress. So I love that.
I've spoken at business workshops and used the entire hour for just that question alone. And then you get an opportunity to have, some roundtables and CEOs or business owners are talking. And man, I mean, so I'll say, what is it the right time for your life personally? What is the right time to do? Like, what is it the right time for? And let them talk. Like, give them up. They're already brilliant, smart, intelligent, hardworking people. Like, let them answer the question. And then you might say, what's it the right time in your business for? Like, you just know it's time. It's daunting or it's difficult or it's challenging, but it's probably the one thing that you're avoiding. And
Absolutely.
so, for whatever reason you think, well, it's that will take me down a rabbit trail of just difficult decisions to make. Yeah, but it's probably the one that you're avoiding that'll provide the breakthrough that you're looking for.
I love that. To our audience, the achiever, we just got coached. We just got coached on timing. What is your timing for your life personally? What's timing for your business? So I love that. Thank you for coaching us. That's awesome. If there was one tip you'd give to somebody to help them with their mindset, what would that one tip be?
Oh, there's so many. The way I view what I do is just putting tools in people's tool bags. So, but I would say, yeah, I'm just going to kind of do this off the cuff. I would say that most of us are far more emotional than we think we are. Like we like to think of ourselves as logical, rational people, but it's just not true. It's really not true. I mean, I can think of, hundreds of irrational things that we do every day, whether it's a lack of prioritizing what's important to us and, eating something we shouldn't eat. I mean, it's just like, let's just be honest. We're very irrational people, but we are very emotional people. And so sometimes what we like to do is say, justify our rationality emotionally. And sometimes we're very emotional. We like to justify ourselves rationally. But it's probably the latter that's the issue, is that we're very emotional people that we like to justify rationally. And I would say there's a concept that I teach in mental performance about how to regulate yourself emotionally.
Hmm.
And so there's something called the Yerkes-Dodson scale. And it's like, these two guys got together in the 1940s and 50s and said, what amount of emotional engagement is prime for production and for producing great results? And so they determined and they created this Yerkes-Dodson scale because those are the guys that created it. And they said, so think of it like a graph, and on the vertical axis is your performance, on the horizontal axis is your amount of emotional engagement and activation. And so what they discovered was between 4 and 6, if you put it 1 through 10 on the horizontal axis, between 4 and 6 is, and you can kind of draw a triangle, is your prime optimal emotional engagement. So if you're under, and if you're at all into sports or even in business, but sports is an easy illustration. You watch a team that's just asleep, you're like, come on, guys, you got to wake up here. Like, call a timeout, coach. Like, come on, let's get with it. And overactivation is when you see a player throw a helmet or blow a gasket, or they do a stupid penalty that cost the team at a crucial moment. We had a player for the Seattle Mariners, after striking out, kicked a water cooler and broke his toe. Right, a first round draft pick. Right, so he's costing not only his own career but his entire team. So it's like, well, how do I regulate myself emotionally? Well, you try and figure out ways. If number one is to be aware of where you are on the scale. That's number one. So if you're a 6, you got to figure out, or 7, you got to figure out how to come down a notch or two. And if you're underactivated, you got to figure out how to come up a notch or two, because that's where your prime performance is. And so you just got to figure out strategies that are identity based that help you come down or go up. But if you're in that peak performance zone, man, you got to figure out a way to stay that way, whether you're in business or an athlete. You got to figure out a way to stay in that zone. If you're a business leader, or if you're an athlete, you got to figure out ways to manipulate your emotions so that you can be in that prime performance zone. There are ways to do it. There's multiple ways to do it, but the first one is being aware. The second one is educating yourself. Like, okay, so I'm charged up right now. Think of like a marriage relationship or a business. You're charged emotionally. I'm not going to be at my best when I'm charged emotionally, when I'm 6, 7, or 8 or 9, right? I'm overheating and I got to figure out a way to come down so I can be at my best in my marriage. And so I just think using that tool and that grid is such a helpful tool and mechanism, because if I'm in a high pressure situation, I'm definitely not delivering my best solutions when I'm emotionally or over emotionally engaged or under emotionally engaged. So that would be one tip or tool that I would use. And I think even for coaches, you come into your day with all sorts of previous experiences and thoughts, maybe, from the previous day, week, or even hours or month or what. I mean, whatever you're walking through, you got to figure out a way. How do I not just sort of like calm down, but how do I get in my peak performance zone? And I think our clients are worth being our best.
I love that. Thank you for that tip, because that it is about regulating ourselves, and that self-awareness is huge. If we don't recognize it, we can't control it. And so I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I love our conversation. You've really been insightful, and I appreciate you sharing your experience. If there was one thing that one suggestion you'd give to somebody that's considering being coached, what suggestion would you give them?
Yeah, I would say you don't have to be sick to want to get better.
Mm,
Like there's a mental block that says, well, if I ask someone for help, that means I'm not doing very well. Listen, I'm telling you the truth. You're already good at what you do. But if you want to go to your next level, you got to get a coach. You just have to, because they're
yeah.
going to challenge you in ways that you can't challenge yourself. And you got to get outside of the pickle jar so that you can have someone reflect to you where you are and challenge you to be better. So you don't have to be sick to want to get better, right? If you want to be at your best. And here's what Pete Carroll said as well. He said, the best always want to get better.
Mhm.
So they are looking for ways to get better. Are they already good at what Come on, they're professionals, they're elite athletes, and they're still looking for ways to get better. So you have to sort of like swallow your pride. Don't think that this is for sick people or think people that are underperforming. Listen, this is for cutting edge. You're in the top 1%, and they still want to get better. So the fact that you might consider getting a coach, I think, is incredibly intelligent and smart. And I think it will only benefit you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to share a couple things just to summarize for our audience, the Achiever, a couple key points that I gathered from Gary today. Number one is defining coaching as unlocking potential. It is about unlocking our performance, unlocking what that next level might be, and think about what's right with people and go with that. Don't think about what's wrong with them or what's not working. Think about what is working and what's right with people. And the last one I'll share is just what we talked about, being that self-awareness and where you're at in that emotional scale and how you're responding to that, so you can respond in a more manageable way to improve yourself and the team and your business. So I love it. Gary, I really appreciate your time today. It's been a fun conversation. Any last comments you'd like to give to our audience?
Yeah, I would say the world needs you to be at your best. I teach something called the SFO principle, self for others. You got to take care of yourself. And in order for you to take care of yourself, um, listen, I think mental health is really important. I listen, there's no argument from me, but I don't think that it's enough.
Yeah.
I truly do not believe that. I think mental health is one thing, mental performance is a whole other thing. And I remember walking through a professional football facility, and I'm talking to the coach. We walk by the training room and we kind of, say, make some introductions and things like that. And then we walk into the weight room and I said, Coach, this is what I do. Mental health is the training room where you get bandaged and iced up. about mental performance is making people stronger mentally. And I think mental health is great, but there's a whole next level, and that's mental performance. And I think that's available to all of us.
Absolutely. Love that. Well, how can our audience get a hold of you if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on I think you can just Google my name on and I'm probably quite a few different places. However, I do camp out on Instagram because a lot of my clients are there as athletes and business professionals. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Gary Chupik on LinkedIn. On Instagram, it's Elite Mindset. I'm the guy with the blue verification dot. If people want to find me, they can always look at me there under Elite Mindset. My website is Elite Mindset Nation because I want to create a nation of high performers that make an impact in the world. So yeah, people can find me there.
Awesome. Gary, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your expertise and your time and your insights on not only mental performance, but coaching as well. So thank you so much. And to our audience, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like the episode, and keep growing in that mental aspect of it. Every single day, we can grow and learn and keep that self-awareness going. So thanks for joining us today on Why Coaching Works. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Why Coaching Works podcast. I hope this episode has helped you see that individual, business, and executive impact, growth, and development that coaching provides. Please take a second to give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Each review helps me impact more people just like you and make a difference in this world. See you on the next episode of Why Coaching Works.